Hello, this is part of a series of discussions about performance and productivity by using the people in your organization. Navjeet Grewaal specialises in leadership coaching, and I, Jon Baker, focus on helping leaders understand introversion to improve productivity. And today we're going to talk about inclusive leadership. Navjeet, let's start with a really easy question, maybe. What is inclusive leadership?
Hi, John. Nice to be part of this conversation. Well, you say it's easy. I don't think so. It's an easy question.
I think if it was
Uh,
that easy, it would have been answered a long time ago. So yeah.
I know. Yeah. But as I think inclusive leadership has always been a very important part of leadership, because if you see leadership is about direction, is inspiring people, a group of people to come together, to work together, to achieve a bigger purpose or a common goal. And inclusive leadership is about making those people, the group of people who the leaders are leading, feel more included, feel more, be a part of that group, so that they're more engaged, they're more motivated and more inspired to follow the leader's direction and to move towards achieving that goal. What do you
Okay, so
think? What do
yeah,
you think about it?
so we can effectively what we're doing is we're taking the normal leadership things because I guess if I've done it before. I've gone and interviewed 100 people on leadership, and they say it's about strategy and direction, which of course it is. But I think what by adding that word inclusive, I think we're saying it's much more also about the people, including the people within that so that you get better performance, so that you get better productivity. And as you said, that means that if people feel included, and I guess we can all think back to times in our working lives when we felt included or excluded and how well we performed or didn't at those times. So yeah, I think people, strategy, direction makes sense to me.
Yeah, because it is all about people. The leaders can't go on their own. They need the team. They need the
Mm.
people to follow them, to move in their direction, to achieve those objectives.
So,
So
so interestingly, do you think this is more of an issue now than it was, say, 20, 25 years ago?
interesting question. I think inclusive leadership was always very important,
Mm.
But I guess 20 years back, maybe leaders were more interested about including the top leadership team, or people who they think were more important towards decision making, important stakeholders. But now things have changed, because organizations are operating in very highly complex and uncertain. They are operating in global markets. They have global clients, very diverse workforce, diverse, group of suppliers globally, and especially, now there is a more need for, the leaders to take decisions in a very uncertain and a very complex environment. They need to take decisions quickly. They need people to move to the change in the requirements of the environment. So they need
So
more engaged teams now.
yeah, so effectively, we're saying that a few elements there. Globalization has changed things. We're
Yeah.
saying that because that means you're competing with and you're getting supplies from all around the world potentially, which you didn't used to, and also the business environment is much more changeable perhaps than it was 25 years ago, partly because of globalization, partly because there's just a lot more things going on, whether we talk about you know the unfortunate incidents in Ukraine, whether we talk about the Brexit thing, but there's lots more uncertainty, I think, in the world today, and things change much faster. When that's partly down to IT systems. 25 years ago, things changed at a much slower rate. But I think the interesting thing you said there is, or you implied, or I heard, I'm not sure, is that if 25 years ago, and certainly 50 years ago, for a decision to be made, it came in at a staff level, went up to a leader, came back down, and now we don't have time for that to happen. So therefore, by having more inclusive leadership, by delegating authority to better staff, you're going to get much quicker decisions and much better decisions, and that means more productivity.
Exactly, exactly. Because if you feel, it's not as simple, and as you're saying, that it's not the top-down approach. It's like everybody has to feel included, and they have to be part of the decision. So, and your clients, your suppliers, and your workforce, who are customer facing, who are back end, who are support in the support role, everybody needs to provide that input to the leader, and leader has to take into account everything, and everybody has to be more engaged in decision making process. And that's where people need to feel more included and more inspired, and they have to feel more connected with and more valued, so that they are present all the time to move in the direction which the leader is giving.
So a more inclusive leadership will lead to a workforce that ultimately all workforces are more likely to see, feel, hear what's going on in the marketplace more than a leader, because they're working at a different level in the business. So one of the things I think I just heard you say is that inclusive leadership is going to help you get more information about what's going on in the marketplace as well. If I feel excluded, if I think that you're not interested in what I hear, well, A, I'm not going to bother telling you, and B, I'm probably going to stop listening. So inclusive leadership means you're going to get much more information about what's going on. Therefore, you can use that to a strategic advantage.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there's this data, like Deloitte did the research, and it came up with that 29% of the teams which are led by inclusive leaders are more productive, and they perform better. So this is a proof that, if the leaders are more inclusive in their approach, and they're more sensitive to the needs of their team, and their teams are more engaged. And also, Jon, you have had a lot of experience working with introverts, and you've been, helping leaders be more sensitive to the needs of their teammates who are introverts or who are a different personality style. How do you help them? What is your experience?
I think I'm going to give a really quick answer and then perhaps come back in a few minutes to that one, if that's okay. My experience there is to sit there and say that, and I've interviewed over 500 people, probably getting on for 600 people, about introversion in business, about productivity in business. And about a third of people, about 40% of people, in fact, will say when they're talking to me quietly, they're not properly productive. They recognize they're not fully productive in the business. And I think that's shocking. What's more shocking is that you peel away the kind of onion for a bit and go, well, what's causing that? And what's causing that? The sweet spot, probably the sour spot, would be a better statement. The sour spot is where you've got a combination of people feeling unhappy with the culture in the business, unhappy with the communication style, and they're introverted. And suddenly you're talking, you're talking a very large chunk of people, because generally about a third of the people in most workforces are introverted. And so you can suddenly have a large chunk of people disengaged from the business because the communication style and the culture, both of which are what we're talking about here. They are both driven by the leaders. And if the leader doesn't drive the culture, somebody else is, and the leader should be driving the culture so that it's more inclusive, which is, I think, where we come back to. But one question for you as well, I'm just thinking back to what you were saying about why is it more of an issue? Because there's no more introverts around now than there used to be. Don't think so anyway. But maybe we hear about them more, which is a good thing. But back on this, why is inclusive leadership more of an issue today than it was 25 years ago? The other thing that struck me was Gen Z. And I know you were talking off air about some of the facts you've got about Gen Z. Tell us about how that affects things.
Yeah, I mean, like, we touched on this issue of introverts, or people who are different in their way of how they contribute to the teams. And so Generation Z, like, this is the generation which is very interesting generation, which is like, these are the people who were born after 1995. And according to the research, by 2025, 29% of the population will be represented by Generation Z, or Generation Z, as some people call it.
So I'm not with it, am I? I've got to call it Gen Z.
It sounds very trendy. Yeah. And this Generation Z or Generation Z, it's like, they are very expressive. They're very, so I have a daughter who belongs to this generation, and I've heard them, her and her friends, they're very much into equal rights for, they're very much into how people should be valued. Their differences should be recognized and valued, and the support. And they are not the ones who want to be politically right. And these are the people who are going to form the workforce, the future workforce, And according to the research, 72% of Generation Z or Generation Z, people think that racial equality is one of the most important issue which needs to be addressed at this point of the time. And 60% of them say that they are going to support a brand who stands for, racial equality and gender expression, and basically equal rights for all the sexual orientation and the gender identities. And these are the people who, when they are going to form the workforce, and our leaders need to be more aware of, because leaders, they have to be visionary. They have to lead their teams in the future. They have to think about how the future landscape is changing. So this Generation Z is going to form the part of the workforce. They are going to be their clients, their customers. And these are the important issues which they want the organizations or the leaders to be sensitive about. And I think that is where the leaders need to become more sensitive about this need for people to be to feel included.
So a growing part of everybody's workforce is going to be Gen Z, and we need to consider it for a couple of reasons. Number one is, as an employee, they are actively looking to be engaged by their leadership, and they are much more passionate about equal opportunities, inclusion and exclusion, therefore, because I know you talked about it on a racial basis as well as other things, but perhaps we'll come back to that, but much more interested in making sure that the workplace is a fair place. So that's the internal side, but then we've got the external side, which is, as a customer, they are actively looking for brands that are more inclusive and are more obviously inclusive. Because, great, I could be an inclusive brand with all my staff, but if the rest of the world doesn't know it, I would get ignored. So we've got to think about other ways of showing that the care for the planet. I mean, interesting, I bought, silly story, I bought some toilet rolls the other day. And just before we made this show, I went to the toilet. This is what we talk about on the show. But the toilet rolls I bought have got wrappers around them, and they're called, and I'm sorry for the word I'm going to use, "Who gives a crap?" And each of these, that's the brand, and each of these rolls of toilet paper has got a little message on it, and it's all sustainably sourced bamboo, because apparently this is much more environmentally friendly than recycled paper, and they're actively talking all the time about their culture within the business, as are lots of other brands. And of course, I guess that's done, A, because it's a good thing to do, but also it's going to engage the Gen Z people that we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think your example is an interesting example of how brands are going to talk about and relate to these issues, because these issues are going to be the important issues in future. And the leaders, for them to make their organizations more inclusive, have to become sensitive to these issues, that for people to feel more included, their diverse workforce to feel included, their customers to feel included, they will have to become very sensitive about how the landscape is changing, how people will be more engaged if they are more sensitive to these issues.
One of the things I've found, and I'm not necessarily thinking about inclusion, but in my 30, 40 years of training and managing and leading, I've sometimes realized that one of the best ways to understand you've got to change the way you think is by putting yourself in the other camp, as it were. What does it feel like to be excluded? Sometimes we look at it that way round. How does it feel to be excluded as a member of the workforce, do you think?
That's a very good question, John. How does it feel to be excluded? And the exclusion is more about how different people might feel excluded at different points of time. So the leaders can't sort of I mean, they are obviously, bless them, they have so much important issues they have to provide, beat the competition, run a big organization, deal with such complex and uncertain issues, and drive the bigger profits and everything. And on top of that, they have this issue of getting these people, everybody, feel inclusive. But so many times people can feel excluded, that they don't feel included. But what can the leaders do about it? So I think the most important thing they can do about is how can they basically make people feel supported in the organization? One of the ways you can make people feel inclusive is by providing them the support they need. Because if from mine and yours example, like what example, the experience we have working with different clients, so there are times when they can feel excluded. But then if the leader has been listening, has been supportive, has been more, offering them more support, people do feel accepted and supported by the.
So it's not necessarily a really difficult thing in that sense. So if I feel excluded, it might be because I think nobody's listening, or they're listening but they don't care. And just taking those two things for a second, if I make it therefore obvious that I am listening to you, suddenly you're able to talk to me. That's tick. You feel a bit more included. If I now make it clear that I've heard what you said, perhaps having gone through the conversation or mass conversations in a much bigger organization, I summarize back some of the views, suddenly it's obvious that I've actually heard them because I'm repeating some of the words myself. If I then talk about how we can go on to develop those collectively, people are going to feel more included. If we feel excluded, we start to think, why should I bother? Now, I guess if I looking back at myself, when I felt excluded, I first of all go, then I go, and then I rationalize that, put that one to one side. Then comes the worst part. I don't react. Neither am I being proactive. Neither am I as productivity driven. Neither am I as hardworking. And of course, when I'm being grumpy because I feel excluded, everyone knows I'm excluded. I'm not going to say that's okay, but it's obvious and you can deal with it. When I just cut myself off emotionally from the brand, from the company, that's when it's less noticeable, but also that's when I'm doing less work. Hence the productivity issue.
Yeah, and if you are feeling excluded, if you are not feeling supported, if you're not feeling being heard, being valued, being respected, and on top of that, you don't feel supported, in the organization, you would be not engaged. You would not be ready for change, or not be ready to share your ideas or move with the team with the, the agility which is required. And and so then you'll be certainly feeling very demotivated. You'll be maybe looking for another job or so, or maybe looking for another brand.
And then immediately we got onto this, the cost of staff recruitment and staff retention. I think we're kind of running out of time at the moment, Navjeet. So what I'd suggest is, we've been talking for about 20 minutes on what inclusive leadership is. We've started to touch on some of the benefits of it. We've started to touch on how you can be more inclusive as a leader. And this is part of a series, so next time round we'll talk much more, I think, about the benefits and explore the benefits of inclusive leadership a bit more. And I think it might be good just to reflect and ask. In fact, I'll ask all the listeners just to ask themselves 3 questions then. Number 1 would be to say, is your organisation sensitive enough for your workforce? Because different workforces are different, and only you can answer that. We can't. Number 2, do your team members feel valued? And unless you talk to them, you won't know. And I guess the third one then is, how do you provide support for those who feel excluded? But other than that, I'm going to say goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. I think that's a good point to end your session with. Next time we can take more on, because this is such a huge topic.
Oh, it's a massive topic, and we've got several weeks worth of content to talk about. Thanks a lot, Navjeet.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jon.